like this. The recording is going to be starting now, and here we go. So found it really difficult to talk about a levy for the Hockinson School District without first starting with Hockinson, the community. As an unincorporated area, Hockinson is classified by the U.S. Census Bureau as a census designated place. And on the 2020 census, it revealed some kind of interesting profile information about our community. First of all, our population has grown from around 4,700 residents to just over 6,000 in the past 10 years. The average home value is roughly $450,000, $460,000. Something that was surprising to me is that homes in Hockinson are, largely connected to the internet. Now, I don't know if people would say, that they're satisfied with their internet service, but still a vast majority of Hockinson homes have Wi-Fi. Something that may surprise some people is that there are 419 businesses in Hockinson, and they may not always operate storefront, but we have a lot of independent businesses in our area. Another interesting fact about our population is that roughly 1/4 are under the age of 18. And so that translates in our district to a current enrollment of just shy of 1,900 students. Geographically, Hockinson is pretty much in the heart of Clark County. And in many ways, I would say the schools in Hockinson are the heart of the Hockinson community. It can be argued that this relationship that has defined Hockinson started around 1870, when Hockinson was home to numerous creameries and established its first public school near the site of the community center, the old middle school. Generations of Hockinson students have been educated in Hockinson schools. They have also participated in sports and activities that have given the participants the opportunity to develop their skills and represent their community. What defines Hockinson today? Well, in large part, still its schools. There are 3 of them that house the area's learners during the day and are open to community use in the evenings and on weekends. Also, you cannot talk about Hockinson schools nor the Hockinson community without the incredible students who have shown so much resilience these past few years and really need not only academic opportunities, but they need support through socio-emotional programs and extracurricular activities. These pictures show a K-12 spectrum, and there's been one exciting addition this year, and that has been Transitional Kindergarten. That is a program that is open to 4-year-olds, and it develops skills to promote the successful transition to kindergarten. It's difficult recently to think about Hockinson without thinking about its amazing athletic programs and clubs that represent the school in competitions around the region and state. And then when you look at this middle picture, that is of the first robotics team. And that is a cooperative program to which Hockinson belongs. And in that case, they actually compete on a global stage in international competitions. Service. I think service, when we talk about heart, I think that shows up in the way our schools and students contribute to the broader community through events such as the Hockinson Saturday Market. That actually gives exposure in that storefront to some of those independent businesses that were mentioned earlier. They also participate in community cleanup days. The middle picture is from last year's Martin Luther King Cleanup Day, which was again repeated this past weekend in 2022. The holiday food drive, which is done jointly with Fire District 3, fun days, and the thousands of hours of community service that goes towards projects that are either adopted or organized by student leadership at the high school, actually all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school, and then also our service clubs, which primarily are Key Club and National Honor Society. I think what you see, when you see a picture like this, Hockinson schools and the Hockinson community come together largely around games, concerts, and performances to remind us all how interconnected we are with family, friends, interests, and the happenings in our schools. So that's the backdrop. And I'm going to transition to the topic at hand, which is the upcoming Educational Programs and Maintenance Levy for our district. In order for us to fulfill a pretty lofty mission in our district's strategic plan, which is based on our mission, we must link our resources with our priorities. And we just simply cannot serve our students and make this vision a reality without the support of our community. And when you do this, levy spending, the levy dollars should translate into the things that are listed on this screen. Largely things like high quality instruction, socio-emotional support, sports and activities, student safety, professional development so we can always improve, and communication that informs our community. We need those in place to meet expectations, comply with mandates, and that kind of ties into the third to last point about fiscal transparency and accountability. Our finances are available for public view. They are reviewed by the state auditor's office. And so by doing all these things in good faith, we hopefully prepare our students for lifelong success. So this brings us to this key question tonight is, why do we need a levy? And I'm going to try not to do this very frequently on the slides, but I'm just going to do a voiceover. Levy dollars make up the difference between what the state provides for K-12 basic education and the actual cost of what's involved to keep students safe and healthy and provide them with the options and opportunities that provide them for future success. So what we've tried to come up with something we can always remember, and our metaphor is the bridge. If the bridge is halfway over the river, and that's the state funding, and on the other half is our goals, it's that levy that kind of joins the two together. This is something that is, I think every school district struggles with, and it is the formula that is used to determine basic education funding. This is called in the state of Washington the prototypical school funding model. And it's something that has been in place since 1975 and has largely gone unchanged. So there's a certain ratio that the state assigns to positions, and some of them are listed here. And the ratios that appear on your screen, those are cumulative. So they're the addition, they're kind of the product when you add what is funded for elementary, middle, and high school. And so it's not a misprint when you see that roughly a third of a position is the total that the state funds, when really we have 2 nurses that serve our 3 schools. Another one on here is security personnel. State funds basically 40% of 1 security monitor, but we have 3. And they may have different titles. I think at the elementary school, it's a student support specialist, but that's essentially what we're funding that position for. And then this last line is also very illustrative of some of the problem where funding doesn't match expectations. And that is with co-curricular and extracurricular activities. State doesn't fund that. And so when we talk about our coaches, our athletic coordinators, directors for school plays and musicals, directors for band concerts, those are all positions that do not receive state funding. And in Hockinson, they total around just shy of 50 positions. And so those are levy dollars that make up that difference. Our current levy, it seems like the vote just occurred, and in some ways it did, but it was actually in April of 2019. That levy is set to expire at the end of this calendar year. And with it, it takes around $3 million this year. I think it's what it amounts to roughly. And that is around 11% of our operating budget. There are three main revenue streams. The first is the largest from the state of Washington. The other is federal. And then the blue on your screen is local. So what we're proposing for the Hockinson community is it's a 4-year levy at a rate of $1.89 for $1,000 estimated value. It collects over the duration of the levy $17.7 million. And again, it's broken out over these 4 years. The community will vote on that on February 8th. And if approved, what you'll see is that Hockinson is experiencing a drop in federal funding, and that will affect the overall percentage of the levy, even though the dollars are going to stay, the dollars collected are going to stay in that $4 to $5 million range every year. I was talking to our business director, Kim Noah, who's here tonight, and she said, well, you know, it's been a kind of an abnormal influx of federal dollars the last couple of years. And when that's removed, that is going to impact the percentages. So we talk about the levy rate, and I think it's important that homeowners understand this is not a new tax. There is an existing levy, right? We're in the third year of a 3-year levy. And so we're asking for a new one to be approved. And if it is approved, it will replace that levy in basically January 2023, right at the beginning. Now, the projected rate, and I say projected because it's based on estimates, they're really about a year behind in home values, is $1.89 per 1,000 assessed value. We actually anticipate that will be lower, but we have to base it on the 2021 real estate values. And so that rate, although higher, is the second lowest in Clark County. And so here's a table that compares levy rates in area schools. And you'll see that at the bottom, there's the Center, Ridgefield, and currently Hawkinson, all at $1.50. And there are some things in terms of different conditions, however. For instance, Ridgefield has a much larger tax base. And so I think this year they're collecting around $6 million, whereas Hockinson is collecting just shy of $3 million. So the proposed rate is higher, but that is the rate we have determined that is needed to cover the cost of continuing essential student services for our kids. So there is I don't know how to say this, and I've fielded a few questions on it already, which is, if it's not going to fully cover some of our costs and key positions, why are we running it? And I think it's because there's a long tradition of being fiscally responsible and frugal in Hockinson. And so I think this levy is a continuation of that, even though it is at a higher rate. So we want to make sure expectations are in line with reality. We're looking to recent years and we compare our staffing levels in 2021-22 with 2018-19. They're much lower than 3 years ago. And we've had to make some reductions in programs and personnel to balance our budget. And with the passage of this levy, we hope to restore some of those positions and programs, but according to kind of our math, we're not going to be able to restore all of them. And so we're just really going to look to our priorities, and we're going to link resources to our priorities moving forward. Levy dollars. What specifically do they pay for? Here's kind of an itemized list. instructional technology, athletics, arts, activities, building maintenance, teachers and support staff, social emotional learning and supports for students, and that could take the form of counselors and behavioral specialists, elective and advanced classes, especially at the secondary level. You'll see those textbooks and curricula to make sure they're current. Special education services. This is an area that is a great illustration of how state funding does not cover the total cost. And so local school districts often have to supplement state special education funding with quite a few levy dollars, and we're no different. I think this last year it was around $1.8 million. They came out of local dollars, could be a little shy of that. And then of course, security and communications. And those are critical for schools, and they're critical for our families to have in place. So we're going to look at this a little conversely. Okay, what do we lose if this levy does not pass and we fail to collect $4+ million a year? Well, I think what we're going to see is larger class sizes because levy dollars do pay for additional certificated staff to reduce the student to staff ratio. We will see our technology become outdated, as well as our instructional materials. I put in this picture for a reason. This was November of 2019, and it was my first fall as Hockinson Superintendent, and held a tech forum. And the purpose of it was to explain that our tech was aged out. All of our iPads would no longer work at the end of the school year. And there have been a lot of bad things that have happened due to COVID. There have been some good things. Maybe it doesn't balance out, but I will say a silver lining to COVID is that there were some savings that our school board parlayed into the purchase of Chromebooks. And so that enabled us to provide educational technology for our students that otherwise we wouldn't have had. And so we always need to make sure that we collect enough money so that we can maintain a tech replacement cycle. If the levy doesn't pass, some programs that we kind of take for granted in Hockinson that other school districts don't provide, especially at the elementary level, are art and music. And without levy dollars, those programs get trimmed, and sometimes when you lose them, they don't always come back. And other programs like a librarian, this is a program, library services has been something that's been reduced, but we still have a teacher librarian in place. And without that position, we could lose library support for our students. Programs, a lot of co-curricular programs. Here's a picture of Future Business Leaders of America. That's just an example. Without levy dollars, you can't pay for the advisor, the transportation costs, and every other expense that goes with programs. If it doesn't pass, we will have to look to reduce our school budgets. Those school budgets have already been reduced over the past 2 years, 25%. And so we need to look, if our levy is approved, we will need to look to enhancing those budgets, because out of those budgets are purchased, well, kind of uninspiring things like copies, but then also learning materials and things like assemblies, etc. So basically every operating expense, even furniture, comes out of our building budgets. And so those will need to be restored, especially in light of inflation. We have, this is a big one, especially for our students and families. If without levy dollars, we would either greatly reduce or in many cases eliminate our athletic programs. And our neighboring district, which did run a successful levy this past fall, Battleground just restored its middle school athletic programs after 40 years. And so we would have to follow suit if we didn't have levy dollars to pay for the coaches and transportation and equipment that go with operating athletic programs at the high school and the middle school. Would there be an impact to transportation? I would anticipate there would be an impact to transportation without levy dollars. Probably right now, I think we're running 15 regular routes and then numerous special education routes. Those would get consolidated, which would lead to overcrowding and longer ride times. And here's a topic that it's kind of straightforward, but it's also complex. Maintenance can include replacement, repairs, and cleaning. HSD has done an excellent job of being proactive with daily maintenance and small projects, so our buildings are warm, clean, safe, and conducive to learning. Large-scale projects, however, and replacements of things like tracks, gym floor resurfacing, replacement of heating and cooling systems, to make those happen, we really need to start looking maybe at a capital levy or a bond. And so I'd say in terms of our maintenance, the maintenance dollars that come from levies kind of get us through to some of the larger expenses. Levies, is this a Hockinson phenomena? No, it's not a Hawkinson phenomena. I had a little subtitle here. I called it a continuing fact of life in Washington's public schools. So this was information that was provided by school board member Patrick Carter. He found this and thought it was, it's kind of educational. Out of the 295 districts in the state of Washington, 284 have levies. And I suppose somebody could start asking us about what about those 11? And I don't know. There are many different sizes and types of districts, from tribal schools to charter schools, etc. So I'm not quite sure, but it shows that overwhelmingly prevalence of levy dollars and the reliance on the revenue that comes from local support. So Hawkinson Way, great expectations and greatness on a budget. We're always going to try to meet those expectations. To even have a shot at those, we do need local support. And if you'd like to learn more about what that local support entails, there is a levy information page on the school district website. So on the main page under About, and you go to Levy Information, you'll find a website devoted to that. And then also an informational mailer is going to go out to families. We anticipate early part of next week. So at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that Peter Van Nortwick, the Clark County Assessor, is in the audience. And so I'm going to ask Andrew to give me a hand here. We're going to shift into a short presentation from Mr. Van Nortwick. And here we go, good news share.
Okay.
Peter, if you can hear me, Andrew, our tech master, he really bailed me out there. What we have is we have your presentation up on the screen, and I'll advance the slides for you. Is that okay?
Yes, that works for me. Yes. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to talk to the citizens tonight. I am Peter Van Nortwick. I'm
Peter,
the Clark County Assessor.
Okay. So you just give me the cue, and I'll advance the slide.
Okay, sure. So I'm Peter Van Nortwick, Clark County Assessor. You can advance the slide now.
Thanks for being here tonight, and sorry for the delay.
Oh, that's fine. All right. The first thing is, who has to determine property taxes? I think that's always a good thing to cover. The state legislature, they determine what the state schools is. County councils also determine property taxes. City councils, then elected tax district boards such as cemetery board, fire districts, different type of people. But the biggest decider of property taxes is the voters, like in these levies. So the property taxes that you see in your bill, they are all voted on by people that are represented by you or by the voters themselves. So next slide. All right, so I just want to talk a little bit about what's going to be happening to property taxes in 2022. So many of you may remember a while ago, the state legislature changed the system to where this levy was fixed as a fixed rate. And so as assessed values increased, the amount of money that we also had to collect for the state schools greatly increased. And what we are now seeing and starting for the first time in 2022, they're actually going back to the standard way that we do budgets in the state of Washington. And that is that each year a tax district gets the amount they collected the year before, plus a 1% increase, plus any new construction. So as you can see, starting in 2018, the tax rate was 289. Then the legislature, people complained too much. They brought it down one year to 250, and went back up to 284, and then to 294. And in 2022, and when the tax bills come out, the new state tax rate will be 273. And that is because as assessed values increase, the amount of money they collect can't increase as much. And so the tax rate goes down, and that should continue on for the state schools as long as the state legislature doesn't go and implement any new state school taxes. So we'll see that trending down as assessed values go up. So as you can see what was happening in the Hockinson School District, in 2018, they collected $3.42 per thousand. And for the last 4 years, they've really held the line at $1.50 per thousand. So next slide. So in 2018, they collected 4.75 million. In 2019, it was 2.37, then 2.54, 2.81, and then in 2022, they're going to collect 3 million. All right, next, you can go to the next slide. So as the superintendent mentioned before, these are the 2022 tax rates. So I think the rates that were provided before were probably the 2021, but these are the ones that actually my office is the only one that knows what they are. To say Hawkinson was $1.50, Vancouver is $1.96, plus they do have a technology levy. Washougal's at $2.15, Evergreen's at $1.70, Camas is at $2.29, Battleground School District now is at $1.95, and of course Ridgefield is at $1.50. And so I think you can see what they're asking. Even with the increase they're doing, you'll still be a lot lower than the majority of the schools in Clark County. So next slide. So that was basically kind of what I wanted to bring in, is just give everyone an idea of what's happening with the state schools and really where Hockinson is in comparison to everyone. And if anyone had any questions, that I'd be glad to answer them.
So Mr. Van Norwick, what we have is a link where viewers can kind of write their questions in.
Okay.
And we're monitoring that. And then while people might be submitting questions through that link, which is on our upcoming events, just to have joined this webinar, below that, viewers, there's a link for submitting questions. I'm going to ask you a couple questions to buy a little time. Yes, that comparison table that was in the presentation was on the 2021 rates. And so when you say in 2022, these rates are a little lower, that is because of increased home values. Is that correct? So it's the rates are going to drop because when you multiply that out, you get the same collection rate that was advertised, but the rate itself is lower. Is that
correct? And I think the thing for everyone to remember when they pass a levy is that you're approving a set dollar amount. So it doesn't matter if assessed values increase or decrease, we are collecting that exact dollar amount. And so when you have new construction that comes in and home values that increase, that tax rate will go down because school districts don't get the advantage of new construction like a county would do or a city. What it does is it just spreads out the amount that they can collect amongst that broader tax base, and the rates will go down. So you'll see the tendency for the rates to go down over time as assessed values increase and we bring in the same amount of dollars.
And then Mr. Van Norwick, the other thing I want to talk about was this line graph that you prepared. Is that in 2018, the state imposed a new state tax, right? And this was kind of part of that McCleary transition. And there was a cap, right? And there was initially $1.50 for each school district. And then that cap was later lifted to $2.50. And Hockinson remained at that $1.50 level. And I think we have since learned why the ceiling was lifted, because we've had those 3 years of budget reductions since. It just wasn't adequate. I think the state anticipated they were going to be able to pay a larger percentage of costs for school districts than they could. And then so there's kind of a recalibration, I guess you'd say, of the local contribution a little bit. So I just wanted to point that out. And that's, I think, is that correct? As 2018 represents the McCleary transition?
Yeah, that was when the first year McCleary, and then it's the first year McCleary, the state increased the amount they could collect, and school districts got to collect their entire levy. And then 2019, they put the 150 cap on. And then 2020, they raised it to 250. And you saw a lot of districts went and moved up to the 250. Some of them moved all the way up to 250. But there's a lot of them that chose to, really respect what the deal was with McCleary to begin with. And Hawkinson and Ridgefield, and there were a couple of those districts that actually did that. And I think Evergreen for a couple of years also, or for at least a year, stayed at the $1.50, because that was kind of the deal that was brokered. So I think any of the school districts that kept at the $1.50 were really trying to keep in line with that decision that the legislature made and how it would be done, and really manage taxpayer expectations as best as possible.
So Teresa, I'm going to shift over to you. Do you have some questions that might be appropriate for Mr. Van Norwick to respond to?
The questions that came in from the community. Yeah. So here's one of the questions. What specific cuts will be made at each school or within the district should the levy fail? Additionally, I've heard and read from community members that our district may be absorbed by another school district should the levy fail. How probable is this? Because if this is a real consequence of a levy failure, the community needs to be well aware of this fact and how this will negatively impact our kids, our community, and property values, which will negatively impact people who do not have kids in school as well.
So Peter, maybe that first part isn't something you can answer to, but do you have any familiarity with the process that is kicked off when a district financially can't meet its obligations?
Yeah, there have been districts around the state that's happened to. I wrote an op-ed for the Battleground School District on one of their levies years ago. When you have multiple levy failures to a point, and it's usually, I think, 3 or 4, right? When you have 3 or 4 in a row where you fail, it can come into a situation where the district just can't survive anymore, and it will be incorporated into another district. And one of the things to realize is that the last one that it happened, which was up in Lewis County, they actually ended up paying a higher rate than they would have had they passed their own levy, because the school district that they were absorbed into already had a higher rate. The other thing to realize is if you do lose your district, you still have to pay for those bonds that were approved. So if you have bonds to pay for a school, you have to pay those bonds off if it takes 20 or 30 years, even if your district goes away. The other thing that happens in that is you would still be paying for those bonds, and then the new district that you would move into, you would also be picking up any new bonds that district may have. So there are, like I said, it's not very often that it happens, and it takes a number of levy failures before typically school districts are absorbed into a neighboring school district.
Thank you, Peter. Do you have another question, Teresa?
Yeah, so here's another community question. I believe this is just a replacement levy. This is not a significant change. I understand impact of property valuations changes. Without this levy, key and popular programs like sports, band, and class offerings are impacted? Question mark.
So I guess that one would be for me, and I think I addressed that in the presentation. So let's just talk about sports. We currently offer, I think, 18 sports at the high school, and those are funded almost exclusively through levy dollars, also some ASB dollars in there, as well as, I suppose, maybe some reassigned general fund. But yeah, if we lose that revenue stream, then we will not be able to offer those sports because we won't be able to afford them. Peter,
so hey, if I could also address that, because I am actually a volunteer coach in the Vancouver School District for football. I coach eighth grade football at Thomas Jefferson Middle School, coach linebackers. And I think one of the things that, even when you put down the number of coaches, that a lot of people don't realize out in the community is that on any team, whether it's a high school team, middle school, there's also a lot of volunteer coaches that are in that number. And so in reality, the community is not even carrying the full weight of what is done now, because there are so many people that do step up, like myself, and volunteer to help those sports programs out.
Peter, that is especially true in Hockinson. So I was really mindful of the clock, so I was rushing through some slides, but there was one slide near the end that talked about the Hawkinson Way. And the Hockinson Way is also really founded on community spirit and volunteerism. And so a lot of our coaches are volunteers, and even our paid coaches in a way are volunteers, because our pay is not competitive with other districts. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We rely a lot on volunteer game workers and volunteer coaches and school volunteers that perform a lot of services for our kids. I know one question that comes up frequently, Peter, is this one. So it's a scenario, and someone will say that I live on a fixed income, and therefore I don't know how I'm going to respond to any tax increase. Can you elaborate a little bit on the program? Kind of, I don't know if it's an assistance program or it's a tax modification program. Can you respond to that?
Oh yeah, so we do have a low income senior program, and it's basically if you make it $50,000 or less, that you are eligible for the senior exemption program, or if you are a disabled military veteran. It is income based, but it is a complete exemption. So if you do qualify for that program, you can apply through my office. You can actually apply online, go to clark.wa.gov/assessor's office, and you can see the senior exemption program on there. But the people that are on that program are exempt from the school taxes. So because they're voted excess levies, and so they are exempt from that. Plus their value is frozen. So there are options. One of the things is even if you're a little bit over that, there's also a deferral of taxes where the state will basically loan the money, and then when the person passes, the estate pay the taxes. So there are a lot of options, and it's really is rare, because we hear a lot about seniors getting taxed out of their homes and stuff. And I'm not saying that property taxes aren't burdensome, but there are programs out there for people that are lower fixed income to actually get property tax relief. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate you elaborating on it. Teresa, any other questions?
There is a third question that came in. Can you review the information again about how the relationship between assessed value and the asked about correlates to a different rate of $1.89? Does that mean I may not actually pay $1.89 as my property value increases?
Peter, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that because, that's kind of the question we get all the time as assessors. And that is, there is a basic formula for all property taxes in the state of Washington. And that is, you take the tax district budget, divide that by the total assessed value, and that gives you the tax rate. And we take that tax rate and apply it back on each individual property owner. So the basis of that is when you approve a levy, you're actually approving a flat dollar amount. So I'm going to just use a round number. If it's $4 million, which is close to what you're asking, if they come in and they send it in to me and say, we want to collect $4,100,000, I go back to the district and say, no, you can only collect $4 million. You can only collect what the taxpayers wanted. So if assessed values are going up, that means that the bottom part of that formula is increasing. And so, yeah, the tax rates will go down. Any new construction that comes in that is being built, that's new dollars that go onto the bottom part of that formula. It brings down the tax rate. So everything that you're approving is the dollar amount. The tax rate is just an estimate. And I think you said it's probably 461 is the median home value in Hockinson. I'd actually be surprised at that point if it's that low, the way the market's been going on. So we are seeing huge increases in assessed values. A lot of times when people get the assessed value notices and it goes up, first thing they'll do is they'll call our office and say, what is this going to do to our property taxes? And a lot of times we have to say, well, we're not really sure because we don't know what each of the tax districts is doing. But we can tell you what we do know is that the tax rate will be lower than it was before because they can't bring any more than the voters approved for them to bring in. So it doesn't matter how much new construction happens in a situation like a levy, they can only bring in the dollar amount that the voters approved to be brought in.
Okay, so Peter, let's take our neighbors Battleground for an example, $1.95. And then they ran their levy at $1.99. So what happened in the meantime? So I think in early November, they passed their levy at $1.99 levy rate. And now for 2022, you're projecting it at $1.95.
I'm not projecting that's the rate. So you're projecting and for me, that's the rate. So they projected a $1.99 rate, but the actual rate is a $1.95.
Okay.
So yeah, that's perfectly what you're talking about.
Teresa, any other questions come in from the community?
Not yet.
Patrick, since we have Mr. Van Nortwick here, do you have any questions that would rely on his knowledge that you anticipate people would appreciate being asked?
I think it was just a similar question around the voter approval of the overall lump sum dollar amount and not the levy rate per thousand of assessed value itself. And so I think that's an important distinction to make is, this levy equates to approximately $4 million per year. But that's the dollar amount that the district is asking for the community to invest in, and the levy rate will be a function of what the total assessed value is, with the numerator being that $4 million. So
yeah, so I think another important thing to point out is when the voters pass it, that is the levy limit. Every year, the school district, they can get down, sit down with their budget. They don't have to collect that much. They can collect less. And actually, after the McCleary decision, there was a lot of school districts that did that, right? They went down to the 150, And then they were able to immediately jump up to the 250 because that 250 was still well below the levy limit that was approved by the taxpayers. And that's really kind of what happened in the Battleground School District is they took the 150 and then they raised it up. And there was a number of people that were saying, well, you know, they raised taxes without a vote of the people. When the reality is that the voters prior had set a much higher levy limit than the amount that the school district was asking for. And so it was just the school district, the council, the school board that really sets the amount of collection. And every year they get together and decide in their budget. I think it's in August, September. It's probably no better than I do. But they then set up the exact dollar amount that they're going to collect. And it has to be that amount or it can be lower.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, one struggle that we have is we have to get our budget approved a little earlier than the larger school districts. And so I think sometimes conditions change over the summer. So we have a limited number of people in attendance here tonight. Any questions for those in the audience for Mr. Van Norwick or for the Hawkinson School District? Okay. And then Teresa, we have
a final comment from the community. Go Hockinson. Thank you all for your time. This was a great meeting. So thank you. Nice.
Yeah, we appreciate that. It's nice to get a little enthusiasm. All right. Yeah, go Hawkinson. And then I believe, Peter, you can go too. You can go back to your evening. Thank you for giving us time. And then, of course, a lot of great information.
All right. Well, thank you always for having me.
Good night, Peter.
Good night.
Thank you.
And so I hear our school board members who are representing the board, Patrick Carter and Teresa Van Natta. They said thank you to Mr. Van Norwick, and I think I can speak for the two of you. We're going to say thank you for those of our community members who joined us tonight. I think what we will do is we're going to transcribe the questions that we received, then write the answers, and we're going to add those to our FAQs. If you know, we won't do that until tomorrow. So if you have a question tonight when you, you know, when you're walking around your house or getting ready to go to bed, or maybe you wake up in the middle of the night and you have a levy question, put it on the link, and then we will do our best to have a response to you, because we have a lot of brain power in this room with our business services director and personnel director, school board, and I'll even throw myself in there so we can try to get you a response to your question. One of the goals of Hockinson School District is one of those points that I covered earlier, which is to be transparent. And so we want to make sure our residents get the answers they, you know, they seek. So Andrew, thanks for helping me out tonight. I think we're going to call this an evening. Teresa, no other questions?
No, but thank you, community. Appreciate your support. And it's just a great way to give back and to keep things going here at Hockinson.
You were muted. It didn't None of that came through.
Oh, no, this mic didn't. Okay, well, I guess I will say goodnight, and I will just parrot what Teresa said. Teresa said, thank you, community, for joining us tonight. And levies are important for continuing the programs and services for our kids. So, all right, good night, everybody. Thank you.